Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take sources you're curious about and, well, extract the really fascinating stuff so you feel informed, but, without the overwhelm.
Exactly. You sent us this really insightful academic paper, and our mission today, explore the life of Hassan ibn Yusuf Ahiskali. Quite an improbable journey.
Improbable is definitely the word. I mean, we're talking about a Georgian guy who somehow rises up to become the ruler of Ottoman Algiers.
Mm-hmm.
Think about that. A Georgian way over in Algiers under the Ottomans ending up in charge. It's kind of wild.
It really is. It just shows how history can take these completely unexpected turns, right? The paths individuals can find. And yeah, our main source for this is that academic article you mentioned. It pieces his story together really meticulously from historical records.
Okay, so before we jump right into Hassan himself, maybe we should set the scene a bit. The Ottoman Empire, this whole context he emerges from and then enters.
Good idea. Yeah, we're dealing with the Ottoman Empire, this massive power stretching across regions. And within that, there's a lot of movement of people, including, significantly, Georgians.
Right, and the article highlights two kind of different ways Georgians interacted with the Ottomans.
That's right. On one hand, you have the often quite brutal Ottoman slave trade. This hit Western Georgian regions like Samogrelo and Mingrelia really hard.
How? Like, what kind of numbers are we talking?
Well, the estimates are pretty staggering. Something like 12,000 people kidnapped or sold every year just from Samogrelo in the first half of the 17th century.
12,000 a year. Wow. That's a huge number. Really puts a human face on it.
It does. But, and this is crucial, the article also points out it wasn't all forced enslavement.
Okay.
There was also voluntary migration, especially from a region called Sanskesarabago.
Yeah.
It was under direct Ottoman rule, also known as Mesketi or Shildirialeti.
Ah, okay, so part of the empire officially.
Exactly. And the population there was majority Muslim Georgian. So many young people from there actually sought opportunities within the Ottoman system. They weren't slaves.
Yeah.
They were migrants looking for, a career path. Understanding that difference is key for Hassan's story.
Got it. So a real mix of forced movement and voluntary migration shaping the Georgian presence. And the article also says that Georgians, like others, could actually rise pretty high in the Ottoman system.
Absolutely. High ranks in administration, in the military, their starting point didn't always dictate their ceiling.
So that's the world Hassan comes from. Tell us about him specifically, his origins.
Well, he comes from that region we just mentioned, Sanskesarabago,
Yeah.
and he clearly identified with it. He used Ahiska, which refers to Ahuska, main center there, as part of his name.
Ahiskali, right. So he's signaling where he's from.
Precisely. It wasn't just a name. It was a marker of his identity within that Ottoman context.
Okay, so this young guy from an Ottoman Georgian region, how does he get all the way over to Algiers? That seems like quite a jump.
The pathway was the Janissary, the Janissaries, the Ottoman elite infantry. He migrated to Algiers pretty young through their recruitment channels.
So he started as a soldier.
Yeah, just a regular soldier initially, which again shows how the Ottoman system could integrate people from different backgrounds into its core.
But he didn't stay a regular soldier for long, right? Ruler of Algiers is a long way from there. What were the steps?
Well, his early career seems marked by really rapid advancement, particularly in the Algerian Navy.
The Navy. Interesting.
Yeah, he clearly had talent, real seamanship skills. By 1770, he wasn't just commanding one ship, he was leading a whole squadron of Algerian warships.
The whole squadron by 1770, that's fast. That suggests, well, either serious skill or maybe he knew the right people.
It definitely suggests exceptional ability, or perhaps, yeah, some very useful connections forged early on.
And his naval service wasn't just local stuff around Algiers. He got involved in bigger Ottoman campaigns.
Correct. He actually served with the main Ottoman fleet in the Black Sea, fighting against the Russians. That experience would have honed his skills even further, and importantly, likely brought him to the attention of higher-ups in the Ottoman command structure. Shows how interconnected things were.
Right, so he's building this reputation as a skilled naval commander. How does he pivot from that to actual political power in Algiers?
A really key figure here is the Dey of Algiers, Mohammed bin Othman. He ruled for quite a while, 1766 to 1791.
Okay.
The article suggests Hassan might have gotten into the Dey's good graces early on by serving as his Khaznador.
Khaznador, what's that?
It's basically the guardian of the treasury, or like a confidential servant, a position of immense trust, very close to the ruler.
I see. So close proximity, trust. That would be a huge advantage.
Exactly. That kind of early relationship likely paved the way for his later influence. Being the treasurer is a pretty powerful spot.
Makes sense, building that personal trust. And then there was this huge event, wasn't there? The Spanish invasion. That really boosted his profile.
Oh, absolutely. 1775. King Charles III of Spain decides he's had enough of the Algerian corsairs, the pirates, and launches this massive amphibious assault on Algiers.
Massive.
I mean, truly huge. We're talking 50 warships, maybe 230 transport ships carrying over 20,000 soldiers, a major European power trying to impose its will.
That sounds absolutely overwhelming. How did Algiers even stand a chance?
Well, it ended in a total disaster for the Spanish.
Really? What happened?
They picked a bad landing spot, got bogged down, and then during the retreat, the Algerians just hammered them. Thousands killed, many more captured. It was a huge victory for Algiers, boosted their prestige enormously.
Wow, a major upset. And Hassan played a big part in getting the news of this victory back to the Ottoman Sultan in Istanbul.
Yes, exactly. Dey Muhammad gave him the honor and the responsibility of delivering this amazing news to Sultan Abdulhamid I. He even took along some lions and slaves as symbolic offerings.
Lions and slaves. Quite the diplomatic package. Being chosen for that mission says a lot about how much the Dey trusted him by then.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just a verbal report he delivered. While he was in Istanbul, Hassan actually wrote up this detailed report for the Sultan. It was called Tarihi Sezier veya Tezibutevari.
Which means?
Something like the history of Algiers, or the refinement of histories. It covered the Spanish attack, the defense, but also went into the history of the Algerian, Ottoman, and Islamic navies.
Showed some real intellectual depth, actually.
And importantly, how did he sign this report?
That's key. He signed it Hassan ibn Yusuf Ahiskali. Again, explicitly stating his Georgian origins, Ahiska.
Right, Ahiskali. Putting it right there in a formal report to the Sultan, that shows some pride in his roots, even while serving the empire.
It really does. It underscores that connection.
And he had another job while in Istanbul too, right? Not just reporting.
Yeah, he was also tasked with recruiting more troops for Algiers. French sources say he managed to get about 1,800 soldiers.
So, successful trip overall, delivers the big news, writes this important report, recruits troops. But getting back wasn't straightforward. Not quite. A bit of irony there. He was sailing back on a French ship, La Septimane, carrying gifts from the Sultan for the day. And just off the coast, they get intercepted by a Spanish patrol boat.
Oh, no. Captured by the Spanish, the people they just defeated?
Exactly.
Yeah.
The ship was declared a prize, taken to Cartagena in Spain. Quite the twist.
So what happened to him? Was he thrown in a dungeon?
Surprisingly, no. He was actually received quite well in Spain.
Really? Why?
Well, Spain was actually looking to make peace with Algiers at this point, a more lasting peace. And here, unexpectedly, is this high-ranking Algerian official. It was a diplomatic opportunity.
Ah, okay. So they treated him well, hoping he could help broker a deal.
Pretty much. King Charles even gave him gifts. There are suggestions, actually, from an American agent later, Joel Barlow, that Hassan might have personally profited from negotiating peace with Spain during this captivity.
Interesting. So a capture turns into a diplomatic mission, and he met Americans there, too.
He did. Diplomats, merchants. One American merchant, John Montgomery, was really impressed, called Hassan a man of uncommon abilities, a wise politician, and noted he seemed quite favorable towards the young United States, as much as he could be.
That's a really interesting early connection. Hassan showing some favor towards Americans even back then. It wasn't all smooth diplomacy in Spain, though. Some friction with the French.
Yeah, apparently Hassan complained the French consul was a bit cold towards him. He reportedly said something like, the French might be allies, but that friendship only seems to exist in Algiers. Shows the tricky alliances of the time.
So eventually he gets back to Algiers in 1776. What kind of position did he hold then, reflecting this new status?
He came back with a lot more prestige. He starts being identified in correspondence as Vicul-Harji de la Marine d'Alger.
Which is?
Basically, chief administrator for the Navy and the harbor. A key role. And by 1783, he's signing things as Intendant de la Régence d'Alger. So clearly moving up in the administration. Real power.
And his personal life flourished too. Marriage into the elite.
Yes. He married the daughter of the Algerian prime minister, the Hasnagi. And he had this incredibly close relationship with Dey Muhammad. So close, in fact, that some diplomats thought he must be the Dey's nephew or cousin.
But he wasn't.
The article says probably not. It just shows how powerful and integrated he'd become. People assumed a family connection because his influence was so great.
Okay, so he's now a major player. Military background, political clout, family connections, and that Spanish connection eventually paid off.
It did. In 1785, they finally proclaimed the Hundred Years' Truce between Spain and Algiers, and Hassan gets a lot of the credit for pushing that through.
What did that truce mean practically?
It meant Algerian corsairs could now sail freely through the Strait of Gibraltar into the Atlantic. A huge win for Algiers, economically and strategically.
A big win for Algiers, but maybe not so great for others, like, say, the brand new United States trying to trade in those waters.
Exactly. Terrible timing for the U.S. Almost immediately, like weeks after the truce, Algerian ships, now out in the Atlantic, captured two American vessels, the Maria and the Dauphin.
Oh, wow.
21 American sailors taken prisoner, brought back to Algiers. A really harsh welcome to Mediterranean realities for American ships.
And the U.S. government back then? Well, it wasn't exactly powerful, was it? Still finding its feet.
Not at all. No real navy to speak of. Government structure still developing. Getting those captives released was a huge headache. And this is where those earlier reports of Hassan being potentially sympathetic start to matter again.
People hoped he might be the key because of that earlier encounter in Spain.
Yeah, American hopes turned towards him.
Yeah.
Maybe he'd be more willing to negotiate reasonably.
And there were reports from the captives themselves about Hassan.
Yes, one captive wrote that Hassan had very great influence and believed he was the most likely successor to the Dey. And crucially, he added that Hassan was most in favor of the Americans. That perception was vital.
Then things took another strange turn. Hassan's father-in-law, the prime minister, was executed.
He was. And normally that would be disastrous for the relatives. Property confiscated, maybe punishment.
But not for Hassan.
Not at all. He faced zero negative consequences. In fact, quite the opposite. In 1788, he was promoted to prime minister and treasurer, taking over his executed father-in-law's jobs.
Wow. That's highly unusual. Speaks volumes about his own power and the Dey's favor.
Absolutely. He basically stepped right into those powerful roles. And as Dey Mohammed's health started failing, Hassan's power just grew and grew.
Became the real power behind the throne, almost.
Pretty much. A French diplomat visited around then and described Hassan as the most powerful, the wealthiest official. Mentioned his reception room was full of jewel-encrusted weapons, called him frank, loyal, someone who kept his word. Clearly a man consolidating serious authority.
And then finally, Dey Mohammed dies in 1791, and Hassan takes the top spot.
Yes. July 12, 1791, he becomes Dey of Algiers.
How did that happen? Was it automatic?
Well, the accounts suggest it wasn't just merit. Apparently, strategically distributing quite a bit of money among the Janissaries, the soldiers, helped smooth the path. Internal politics played a big role.
Okay. So Hassan is finally Dey, and the Americans are thinking, great, our potentially friendly contact is now in charge. Maybe now we can get a deal.
That was definitely the hope. U.S. diplomats were optimistic that his former friendly sentiments, as they put it, would lead to a breakthrough on the treaty and getting the captives home for a reasonable price.
But being Dey isn't the same as being prime minister, right? He had different pressures now.
Exactly. He even reportedly told a French diplomat something like, look, we can't always do what we think is right. We live in a country of bandits whose votes prevail.
A country of bandits.
Yeah. He met the corsairs, the slave owners. They had huge financial interests tied up in capturing ships and holding captives. Hassan had to balance his own views, whatever they were, against those powerful internal groups.
Which probably explains why the first U.S. attempts to negotiate with him as Dey in 1793 didn't go well, even with a personal envoy from President Washington.
Precisely. The potentially sympathetic Hassan suddenly seemed, according to American diplomats, to have unpredictable moods and ungovernable passions.
Ungovernable passions.
Yeah, the U.S. negotiator, Joel Barlow, had some pretty colorful descriptions, said dealing with Hassan was like dealing with a sick child full of whims and fancies.
Yeah.
Made negotiations incredibly tough.
Sounds intensely frustrating, but they did eventually get a treaty.
They did. September 5, 1795, the Algerian-American Peace Treaty was finally signed, but it came at a steep price for the U.S.
So steep.
585,000 Mexican silver dollars, a massive sum back then, ransom for over 100 American captives held there.
Oof. A huge amount for the young U.S. Treasury. Was there any symbolic stuff, too? Gifts exchanged?
Yes, Hassan sent George Washington a rather elegant gold-mounted sword, a personal gift to mark the Treaty of Friendship.
A treaty of friendship bought with $500,000. Okay, but the U.S. had trouble paying up.
Yeah, there were delays in fulfilling all the terms. The money promised naval supplies.
And Hassan wasn't pleased.
Not at all. In May 1796, he actually sent his Christian secretary, who was one of the American captives, back to America with a pretty stern letter for Washington, basically saying, pay up now.
Sending an American captive as the messenger. That's a power move. How did Washington respond?
Apologetically. Explained the delays, setting up a new government, financial difficulties promised it would be sorted out. He even offered to build Algiers a frigate as a goodwill gesture.
Did that smooth things over?
Eventually, John Adams became president, sent more apologies. Finally, a schooner, the Hamdullah, was delivered as a gift in early 1798. Appeasement, basically.
So a very complex relationship with the U.S. Did Hassan use his influence elsewhere in North Africa too? With Tunis and Tripoli?
He did. He actually helped the American diplomats negotiate treaties with Tunis and Tripoli, acting as a kind of guarantor. His navigation passes were respected across the Barbary Coast, showed his regional clout.
But his time as Davy wasn't actually that long, was it?
No, relatively short. He died apparently of old age in May 1798, and a successor took over.
But his reign, those interactions with the U.S., they had a real impact back in America, didn't they? Beyond just the diplomacy.
Well, absolutely. Dealing with Algiers really forced the U.S. to develop its foreign policy muscles, confront these global power dynamics.
Yeah.
And the whole issue of Americans being enslaved in Algiers that fed directly into the debates happening within the U.S. about its own institution of slavery.
How so?
Abolitionist groups like the Pennsylvania Abolition Society drew direct parallels. Look, they said, see how horrible it is when Americans are enslaved? They used the plight of the captives in Algiers to argue against the enslavement of Africans back home. And popular books, like the novel The Algerine Captive, brought the issue into public consciousness.
Wow. So the Barbary issue was tangled up with the domestic slavery debate. That's a powerful connection.
It really is.
So wrapping this up, Hassan ibn Yusuf Ahiskali, it's just an incredible story when you lay it all out. This Georgian kid joins the Ottoman military, rises through the ranks in the Navy, becomes this hugely powerful figure, the ruler in Algiers.
And ends up directly shaping events in the Mediterranean and having these complex, high-stakes interactions with the brand new United States, dealing with Washington, Adams.
Yeah, it's one of those historical threads that connects seemingly totally different worlds. A Georgian from Ahiskali dealing with the American founding fathers over piracy and treaties. Amazing.
It truly highlights those unexpected connections, how history isn't neat boxes, but this interwoven tapestry.
And it definitely makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other stories are out there like this? People from backgrounds you wouldn't expect, rising to influence events on a massive scale. Figures history books might just mention briefly, if at all.
And how events in one corner of the world, like Algiers defeating Spain, can ripple outwards and create completely unforeseen consequences, like triggering decades of conflict for the United States.
Right. Maybe this dive encourages you, listening, to think about that wider context. The Barbary Wars, the Ottoman world in North Africa. There's always more layers to uncover.
Indeed. Looking beyond the headlines, beyond the main figures, that's often where you find some of the most fascinating human stories in history.